Just we've learned about just how crucial technological infrastructure is to the integrity of our electoral process, we've also learned that technology has created a whole new news ecosystem, one in which this phenomenon of fake news has exploded. Donald Trump uses the phrase fake news essentially to apply to any story he doesn't like or any poll that he disagrees with. But you had a different experience of fake news in a purer sense of what fake news was. I just want to talk about, just tell us about that. When fake news became part of your life in the course of the campaign, when you started noticing it and what you did about it.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because it's subterranean in large part. You know, it shows up in the Facebook news feed, but you don't see it because it's not, if anything, it's being debunked in the mainstream media. Right. So in those sources of news, you don't touch and feel it as much as maybe you'd imagine. But it's sinister. And it's a kind of vile stream that's running under the ground that begins to really, I think, have its effect, take its toll. And obviously, the worst conspiracies were culminated in the so-called Comet Pizza episode, in which a guy who volunteered to cook at a fundraiser for Hillary, who runs a pizzeria, upscale pizzeria in Washington, D.C., was accused, along with myself, my brother, and others, of running a child sex ring out of the pizza parlor. Mainstream media debunked that instantly.
I still have some questions about that, by the way.
But you can't pull that back, and that ended up with a guy from North Carolina, if I remember right, getting a gun, driving to Washington to do a self-investigation of what was going on in the basement of the pizzeria. I don't think the pizzeria had a basement, by the way, and firing his weapon. So for the employees there, for James Alefantis, who was the proprietor, for people on the in the community, this is a horrifying episode.
Sure.
But it's very hard to pull this stuff back. And Trump peddles it. His people peddle it. Bannon peddles it. Breitbart peddles it. He still calls Alex Jones and talks to him, and the Infowars,
conspiracy
theories. Sandy Hook didn't happen. It was all made up to try to take your guns away. All that stuff exists. You don't see it. You don't feel it if you're largely living in reality and in a mainstream media world. But it's undermining our democracy, and I think that the companies themselves, they've taken some steps. They have a lot of responsibility.
Companies like Facebook.
Google, et cetera.
Right.
To do what they can to essentially not enhance this, not to create ecosystem where the fake news it rose up. Somebody did it. I'm blanking on who did it, but they looked at Facebook traffic of the 20 top. I think BuzzFeed did it.
Yeah.
The 20 top political stories in the mainstream media and the 20 top fake news stories that were completely debunked, and found that the likes and shares of the fake news exceeded by 20% the mainstream news. So that's a trend that I think we're now seeing played out in Europe, in the U.S. It's undermining our democracy. It's undermining those democracies, and the Russians know how to play this game. So they did it with they intervened directly by the use of bot farms, etc. And I think that I don't know what technical fix I'm asking for, but I think the companies really need to take this seriously.
It's a rather extraordinary thing. Last night was flipping through, Roger Stone, who is a famous dirty trickster and was Trump's political consigliere for 25 years and was an outside advisor on this campaign, has written a book the campaign. And one of the first things he says in the first couple pages, just for those who think that this is a left-wing accusation, one of the first things he says is one of the great geniuses of Donald Trump was his relationship with sites like Breitbart and InfoWars, which is, I mean, Breitbart is a right-wing, white nationalist site. It's one thing. But InfoWars is a crazy person site that has theories of all kinds of nuttiness, like
really pushed the common pizza thing,
yes, the pizza thing, and Sandy Hook didn't happen,
right.
and a variety of other things. And he boasts about the fact that this was one of the keys to Trump winning, was that he found these alternative, quote, news outlets that he established a great bond with, and that's someone who was very happy that Donald Trump was elected president, thinks that's